So I have the application on my computer. I unzipped it in the same download folder, and I just click on the folder itself. So right now I'm inside the actual support portal application, and I'm just gonna click on it so that I can go inside of it. As you can see, it looks exactly the same as we saw on the website when we're bootstrapping this. And I'm just gonna right click on this POM file. As you can see, it's got the IntelliJ logo on it. So that means that IntelliJ is the default application this XML file is gonna be open with. So I'm just gonna right click it or double click it and click on open, and that's gonna launch the IntelliJ IDE. All right, so here we are. It's still loading. All right, so here's the main folder. Let's go into source and main Java, and here is the default package name, and here's the main application file. So I'm gonna close that in a little bit. As you can see, it's a Spring application with the default application file. That's gonna be the starting point of the application. So let's go ahead and create a new package so that we can add all of our domains. So I'm gonna go to package. I should definitely make this bigger. So go to settings, file, and then settings. And let me see how big this is. This is not big enough. Maybe see 14, maybe apply. So that's gonna make all of this, the side panel, everything on the side panel bigger. So I guess that can be even, let's make it 15. Apply. Okay, so you can see everything on the side panel. And I think if I go to editor and I go to font, I can change the font of the actual code. So right now I have it at 20, maybe 22. It's kind of big already. Apply. Okay, so that should be good. So right click on the main actual package name and go under new and then package. So we're gonna call this our domain. As you can see, it just already started the complete package name, and that's what we want. So domain. So you remember in the application demo, we were just showing a bunch of users, right? And again, that can be anything. It can be anything you want. And that's also a really cliche application, like managing something, managing, I don't know, courses or students or user. Because the focus of this course is mostly on using JSON Web Token to secure the application, but the application itself doesn't really matter. The only reason we're building all of this application is because that's just how I like to teach. I like to actually show you an example of in the real world, like from start to finish. And that's I think, at least in my opinion, that's one of the best ways to actually learn something. So let's go ahead and create our user domain. So we're gonna go to new Java class and we're gonna call it user, enter. All right. First thing is our user class is gonna need to implement the serializable. Now, the reason we need to do this is because this class is going to be going from being a Java class into a different stream that can be saved into a database. And that's why we implemented the serializable, because it makes this transition a lot easier when you're moving from one, I guess, type of representation of the data into another. So that's what I'm doing here. All right, so first thing, we're gonna need an ID for this user. So the user is gonna have an ID, and that ID is gonna be served as their primary key in the database. So we're gonna create an ID that's gonna be a long, and next one is going to be an actual user ID. As I showed you in the application, there's like an actual ID that you can actually show to the customer. Now, the reason we're having two IDs is because the first ID, which is this ID right here, right? That's the ID for the database. So that's the primary key, and it identifies that one user. So that's very kind of critical piece of information, because if you know that user ID, you can really go straight to that user. So that's a little bit risky. So we're gonna create a separate ID. In that case, that's gonna be a long, and it's just gonna be some random number. So let's just call it, for instance, user ID, and that's supposed to be lowercase is I. Okay, so that's the difference between those two IDs. And this user ID can be anything else. Like for instance, in your company, you might have like a prefix in front of it. So you might have like, I don't know, CWJ dash and then the ID number, or with the ID number, or anything like that. It's just something that means something in your company. Like it means like this customer is this, and you can use that number to do whatever to identify a customer in your company, but it's not the primary key that is used to save the user in the actual database, because you don't want to expose this information at all to the external world. But there's no, I mean, you can have other ways to look at the customer using this ID, but at least I guess you can still use it to, I guess, do malicious stuff with the database, but at least it's not the primary key, and that makes a big difference, because the primary key is going to be used in different tables, so it lessens the vulnerability a little bit. Okay, so let's give this user like a first name, which is going to be a string. So let's do first name. Let's give them another string, which is gonna be their last name, for instance. And let's do maybe username, because we're gonna need that username. And let's do a password. We're also gonna need the password, and that's gonna be a string, so password. Let's do an email, because we need to send them an email. Well, we need more personal information, so let's do email. And we will use this email to send them an email whenever they sign up, or they renew their their password or something, or just use it if we need to send out information to them. So this is the representation of a user when we're collecting information about them, and all of this information, of course, is going to be saved in a database, retrieved at a later time whenever we need it, and things like that. So another, let's do maybe a profile image. So that's going to be a string, and let's do profile image. That's actually going to be URL, so let's do profile image URL. So for the user, they're going to have a string that's going to be like a URL that's going to point to the actual location of their user profile, which is going to be like a picture. So that's what this is. And let's do another private last login date. So last login date. Actually, just this should be a date. So that's not going to be a string. Let's make this an actual date from Java Util. Okay, so make sure you have date from Java Util imported. And let's give them another date that's going to display the actual last login date. So let's call it last login date display. So this is going to represent their last login date, and this is going to represent the actual date that we're showing as their last login date. That's not right. Yep, like this, last login date. So you will see why I have these two in a minute. This is going to be the last time they log in, and this is going to be the actual date that's going to be used to show when they log in, and you'll understand why I'm using two of them in a minute. And let's give them a date when they join, so that's going to be join date, something like that. And let's do now another thing we're gonna need, I think, let's see, so we have all of this information about them. Now we need a few more properties on this user that we're gonna use to map to the actual user that is in Spring, because we're gonna use that user in Spring to do a lot of manipulation with the security. So we need to have certain properties on this user that we can set, and then we can map those properties over to the actual Spring user. So one of them is going to be the actual roles. So let's create a string array for this. So let's do string array, oops, and that's going to be roles, right? So we create a string arrays. That's gonna be like a string of roles. So for instance, we can have like for instance, like role underscore user, and then role underscore admin, right? So that's what this is gonna hold. This is gonna hold the roles of the actual user, of this user, and that can be like a string of roles. So that's why I give it a string of roles. And let's do private another string of permission. So that's going to be authorities, right? Authorities. So, you know, beside having roles, we're gonna also have authorities, and I'm gonna show you the difference between roles and authorities, right? So quickly, roles is like role user, for instance, right? And in the role user, you can have like, let me show you real quick. So let's say this is an array, right? So in the role user, you can have delete permission, right? Let's call those, every item in the actual array is a permission, so or an authority, right? So we can have delete, update, create, right? The typical CRUD operation, right? So you can have this. So that's the difference. So this, which holds all of the authorities with that role, is called the actual role, which is why it's called role user. And the authorities is just all of these, like that can exist inside the actual role of the user. And the reason you want to do that is because you might have some situations where you only want a user with delete authorities to be able to delete some information. You don't care about what role they have. So it just makes the entire system more modular. So you can say, hey, I have a user, I'm just gonna give him the role user. I don't care much, and you know what's defined inside the role user. You probably won't have like something like delete or maybe not create, right? So for a role user, you're gonna keep it more simple. So maybe you can have something like read, right? So that's one, read, maybe edit, right? So for a user, you say, hey, for this user, they have two authorities or permission. They can read and they can edit the information, but they can't do anything else. But at the same time, let's say you have like many different roles and they have many different permission, and you can have like the role admin, for instance, having like delete. So you can have a bunch of users and their admin, you give them the role admin. Now there might be a critical piece of information that you only want someone with this specific permission or authority to do. So that's the difference between the two. You might just want to look just for this instead of looking for the actual role. You'd say, hey, I don't care, just give me this authority. If they have this authority, they have access to do certain thing. Or the same way you can say, hey, I don't care, as long as they're admin, if they're admin, they can do certain things. So it makes the entire system more granular. And let's see if we can give them another thing that we need. It's going to be a Boolean, which is going to be is active. So that's going to determine if they're active or not in terms of their account. And let's do private, another Boolean, and is not locked, to determine if their account is locked or not locked. So again, those are all the properties. We can add more if we want. Usually for like big companies, this list is huge because they have a lot of things. But since we don't really have like a real company, when we have like real requirement from a customer, so we just creating whatever we want and adding whatever we need. Like those four, we actually need them. You can use those for security purposes as well. You can say if you log in, I don't know, like too many times in a row, you can't do certain things, and you might want to use the time that they log in last to determine how many times they're trying to log in and all that stuff. So we can add more information if we want. There's no reason to stop here, but since we're just making this company up, so we can stop here. But if we need to add any more information, we can come back and add it in and just create setters and getters for it.